morning. I'm saying good morning because this is really early in the morning for me. But there are a few people I will get out of bed this early for who, as you can see, are the very lovely Kyra Wisely and Mark Vega, who very kindly agreed to talk to me about one of my new favourite shows, which is Rules of Protection, all about bodyguards. I mean, obviously, I think everyone knows who both of you are, but let's assume that there's someone watching this who doesn't know. And could you please give a brief introduction to the internet of yourself?
Absolutely. Thank you, Jen. You go ahead.
Yeah, hey guys. I'm Mark, and thank you so much for whoever's watching, and specifically to you, Jen. Thanks for getting up. I told Jen that we could have pushed it a little bit, but um, thank you so much. It's we really appreciate you and everything you do, and it's a great pleasure to talk to you.
And I'm Kyra Wisely. Thank you so much, Jen. Super excited to talk about Rules of Protection, the bodyguard I hate. Except I love my bodyguard.
Yeah, I don't like that title. No, I'm kidding. Take care.
So my first question is, Mark, you've done a bodyguard one before, haven't you?
Yeah, yeah, I did.
Um,
It was like my third or fourth vertical, and yeah, it was with Gene Evans and Ryan Henderson Watson, and it was a great one. Pretty different, I'd say. There were some funny similarities, though. Could get into it, but yeah, that was early 2023.
because I find that one quite interesting because I came to verticals from Korean and Chinese dramas, and I've seen the original Chinese drama version of that,
Oh.
which is actually, and there's not many where it's like I have seen the direct original of that which is partly, but I'm really sorry, that's why I haven't reviewed it because the Chinese one's so good, and I think some of the script got lost as it was brought over in the translation.
Oh,
Oh.
okay.
So it actually, I think it lost some of the nuance and levels, and it kind of got simplified down. But yeah,
Interesting.
and I think
Yeah.
there's been at least two adaptations of that. So
Oh.
yeah.
Yeah.
So you, Kira, you hadn't done Bodyguard trope
I
before, had
had
you?
not done a bodyguard trope until this one. I didn't know that you watched like some of the Chinese original versions.
That's cool.
That
Mm.
is cool. I don't think I've ever watched one. A few
It's quite
times that
hard.
I've done verticals, they on set, like the higher ups have shown me that it's been done before and we're doing the
Mm.
American version. But I feel like they change a lot when they like get crossed over.
I think that's probably the best example. I think a lot of the script gets lost
Uh-huh.
because there was a lot more in the original one of just communication. So this one, what was the process of both of you getting attached to the project? That's the first question.
Well, I was doing a real short at the time in LA. I was doing the my the werewolf one that just came out with Abigail Fawn, which was a good one. But they wanted me to do another werewolf one, and I was like, no. And then this bodyguard one came in the same day, and I said, well, bodyguard one would be a lot different than a werewolf one. I would like to do that, switch it up a bit. And it was shooting in New York. I always like working in New York whenever I can. I actually went to school out there a couple years ago for college. I studied business, by the way. I wasn't in acting school, but always loved the East Coast. I have some family out there, so I took the job after reading the script too. They gave me the script that day as I was doing the I can't remember the title, but my werewolf one that just came out. You guys can go and watch it. It's on real short. But but yeah, it was an obvious choice. And obviously didn't want to do two werewolf verticals in a row. I wanted to switch it up. And I heard that it was a one-legged bodyguard who is the new bodyguard of his ex-girlfriend. And I thought that was, oh, that's very interesting. And the whole CEO aspect of the whole healthcare system, that kind of had me a little transfixed there too, especially with everything that was going on. I think they handled it in a good way and in an entertaining way too. They didn't dive too deep into the whole healthcare thing, which was good.
Yeah. Um, I know for
What,
me, I'd never led a real short prior to this project. I was the evil vampire in Fated to My Forbidden Vampire, like back in early 2024. So I was kind of, intrigued in that way. I also I knew that Mark was attached, and I'd been really wanting to work with Mark for a long time. It's true.
She always says that. I
It's
don't
true.
believe. I don't
No,
actually
it's true.
believe.
I'd been wanting to work with you for like a year prior.
That's great.
I'd seen a lot of his work, and he's genuinely one of the most talented actors I've gotten the privilege to work with. So I knew that, with a good story and also with like good actors, good chemistry, we were gonna knock it out of the park, and I believe we did so.
Yeah, I saw that Kyra was attached, and I was actually
You
was
don't have
really
to say that
excited.
just because I did.
No, it's true. I saw it in the email. I only saw her first name, and I assumed that it was her. And she's obviously, she's done so many of these. She's done so many good ones, and I wanted to work with her. It was funny that it was in New York, and we're both out of LA, so that was kind of a fun adventure. It's always fun to work in New York, so it was exciting. So, and I can't believe it's already out. These things are so amazing with how the turnaround, because it was just last March that we filmed it,
Mhm.
and it might feel like a long time ago depending on what's going on, but like for me, it just felt felt like last week or something. Well, I guess a lot has happened since then, so maybe not. Lots of work, lots of hotel rooms. And,
Yeah,
sometimes it could all blur, but this,
yeah. There's a fast turnaround, but they did a good job, regardless.
So, Kira, when you look at this script, okay, so you hear the words bodyguard romance, okay, and then you hear, I think there's an assumption then, often what happens in bodyguard romances about who your character is going to be.
Yes.
Did you have that assumption before you started reading of like, right, okay, she's going to be a pop star, she's going to be a princess, she's going to,
Yeah, I mean, it was also kind of my first time playing a female character that was very much, the dynamic was a little switched, which was very interesting, and very fun to play just because it gave me a lot just to work with, a lot of duality. And there's this vulnerability that my character Elena has because she was in a relationship with Ace and it was young love and it was, sweet, innocent, but then life happens and a lot of bad things happen to her. But then 3 years later we see her as this, she is the CEO. That's crazy, and then there's this dynamic of I mean, Elena is Ace's boss. She is in charge. Um,
that was
so
refreshing.
yeah, so I really, going in and reading the script, I was very shocked, but also intrigued even more so seeing that dynamic and was super excited to get to play around with that.
'cause, yeah, I think that was the first refreshing thing that it's not that partly because of what happens in the story. Obviously, her father's removed from the situation, so you haven't got that the parent has hired in the bodyguard, and that there's always that the parent's the boss, not
Yeah,
yourself. And also, again, that it's not that you're, just the heiress or just the pop, well, not just the pop star, but you know what I mean? You would kind of expect that, but instead it's like she's there as a CEO, and then because they weave in the healthcare, they give you a really strong reason of this is why she does need that protection. It's just so well done.
absolutely. I mean, I think one of the amazing things about this story is that the stakes feel right.
Mhm.
And that, it does, there's not a lot of plot armor.
Mm.
And I was definitely very happy that healthcare was, incorporated into the story. It wasn't a huge focus, but still, I mean, it was a complicated relationship that, my character had with her late father, who was, um, in a way a villain, um, in terms of just treating the general public, but it again gave my character Elena so much power as she was able to come in and be like, this is how I think things should be run and this is how they are going to be run. So it was a nice, message, which I think is often lost in verticals, that at the end of the day there was this message.
And it's really cleverly done. And as you said, there's enough high stakes stuff in the real world you can put in there.
Mhm.
Don't need to go to the always typical vertical tropes of my favourite thing, the bottom feeders and the elites.
Yep.
That's my favourite insult.
Or
Like bottom
just my
feeders.
favorite thing is the entire vertical. Like the only problem was there was a boy mom. Like a boy mom
Yeah.
who was like, my son deserves better than you, blah blah blah. That's the entire conflict
Yeah.
of the vertical. Which no tea, no shade to those stories, but it's also like, it's hard as an actor and just as a storyteller to sell being
Mm.
so devastatingly like at a 100 when it's really not that serious.
So yeah, the great thing about this is obviously they use that, but as you say as well, it's never laboured the point. It never becomes this earnest. It's always a love story. It's just there happens mistakes. Now the other interesting thing about this one as a bodyguard romance is often it's when the bodyguard enters the leading lady's life that's the first time they've met. But this one, I think it's quite different because there's obviously this backstory. We never know how they meet. How do you reckon they meet? What's the meet cute? Do you ever fill that in, or is that?
I figured they met in college. What did you think?
I think probably, yeah, when they were about their early 20s, right? I mean, so late college, junior year, senior year, maybe they went to the same college. Definitely probably studied different things. And then back to the thing where the stakes are so high, it's such a great excuse, right? For him, because he wants all he wants. It was such an easy thing for me as an actor because he just wants another chance, right? And it's it wasn't about, but the bodyguard thing really helps because it was a little unbelievable that he was the best bodyguard in America, but the stunt jobs did, the stunt coordinators did such a great job and they made it very believable that he was very talented and very, very skilled, even despite the fact that he had one leg. And it's believable. I felt like it was believable. You could actually turn that thing into a weapon if it's made of the right material, obviously. Um,
You get some cool fight scenes. You did a good job with them.
Yeah, it was so fun. Shout out to New York City Stage Combat and Adam Gordon. It's great. Adam Garden. There we go. He was a great stunt coordinator. His wife. Can't remember her name.
Caitlin.
Caitlin.
Yeah, I mean, I thought it was really great that they Ace and Elena already had an established history, because that made it really I feel like the romance is really sold on the yearning that we get from Ace. And no
Yeah.
one does a yearn like Mark fucking Vega.
They
Yeah. Oh, I believe that. Yeah.
Well,
Uh-huh.
they gave me a good dramatic thing to kind of cling on to with that high stakes thing, and then we did have such a big history, so it was a lot to grasp onto with those scenes, even between the lines when there was nothing being said. It was and that's always important, and you don't get that in a vertical always. There isn't such a big want for your main character, which you always want want to know what you're going after, even in the micro of scenes. It's obviously the big scenes. There's the apologies and the I love yous and the I made a mistake, whatever it is. But even on the simple scenes, if you could find a little thing that you're looking for that could drive how you're feeling, that could take your mind off the fact that there's 4 cameras on you and you could just be in the moment. It's always good. And the Bodyguard script gave me that. So it goes back to why I took the job in the first place, because I knew it was uh, a powerful conflict. That's what I look for in the roles. So conflict for the character, something I could bite into a little bit.
Yeah, I also think in a way, I mean, you could probably talk more on this, but in terms of male characters in verticals, I would say Ace Atkins is probably one of the most well developed I've seen. It's like it's not just the tale as old as time story of his parents were, strict and overbearing, and he has this icy exterior that is melted by the girl. Like,
He has an
Ace,
icy exterior, but yes,
yes
thank
and
you.
no. I mean, he went through shit, and I think the story, at least as a viewer watching it, instead of, the feeling you have of wanting the girl to melt his exterior, you almost are looking at it from more Ace's lens. You want him to be understood.
Yeah, the longing, you're right. Yeah. I do wish they delve a little deeper into how we met and focused on the difference of the personality, because in the present day, I always played it very, ever since the first or second scene of the father throwing all the money on him, it's pretty serious. I think that was a big turning point. But if they gave more of that contradiction, an opportunity for contradiction with how we met, what we were, and we only got the beginning. There were some flashbacks actually. There was a lot of flashbacks actually. They were quick though, obviously. But I think actually the flashbacks did a good job to show kind of some sort of difference, and that's another goal of the actor. You know that it's a flashback scene, and you figure out what it was before. Sometimes you don't have as much time as you would like to discuss exactly what it's going to be, but you know it's going to be different, and that's the fun of it, because you have to be creative, sometimes even in the moment, and that's sometimes where the magic happens actually. So, but yeah, no, not to go off on a tangent, got all actorish,
But definitely, I think even in your performance in present day, you were able to find moments where, at least me as an actor playing opposite you, I could feel like, as Elena, almost like feeling like, oh my gosh, it's old Ace again, you know? There were definitely moments, and Mark has really, really expressive eyes, as I'm sure we all know. So it's really wonderful playing it opposite him. He hates compliments. That's why I keep doing
I
it.
love compliments.
But it's really great playing opposite him, because you can tell exactly where he's at emotionally, and that elicits such a response for me as an actor.
Thank you.
One of the things I wanted to mention was the early scene of basically like why they broken up. Because I'm sure I've had several people like messaging me going like, is there any vertical that doesn't start with she walks in on him in bed with someone else? That's like in so many verticals. This one is so much better done because it's so much more heartbreaking that Elena's just there waiting and everyone else is getting reunited and no one, doesn't turn up.
Yeah,
That's so much more heartbreaking. Then the fact that she goes and finds out he's been back and he's not told me, that's even more heartbreaking.
Yeah.
And then obviously even when you go around, and I have to do a shout out for Mars because I love Mars to bits, but even that isn't the same. It's more that they're just together and he's obviously with someone else, but you don't actually see stuff. Did that feel refreshing? Because I don't know, I just loved the fact that was all different.
Yeah.
That was, by the way, in Red Hook, Brooklyn area. Not to give it away.
Was that?
Yeah. When you
We
didn't.
filmed that part in Brooklyn?
Oh, well, not. Okay, well, when she's heartbroken that all the military guys are there and it's not Ace, that was in Red Hook, and it's near the Statue of Liberty, actually. But the scene where she walks in on me with Mars, that was anyway. That was in Brooklyn somewhere. But yeah, that was refreshing, and that was hard to pull off. I feel like we kind of had to put some time into that, and because that was pretty harsh on Ace's thing, on Ace's part. Yeah, I don't know if you want to dive into that. It was definitely refreshing, and not like. But usually the lead in a vertical would never be in that. Usually that's the villain. That's the opening villain cheating, or the guy, or the other figure. But it was kind of cool. It was a curveball, and I had to find a way to justify it. And the money scene helped with the father, and it was really about respecting the father, and kind of, it was the wrong choice, but it was too much in my opinion, but he thought that was the right thing to do because he had to find a way to just separate, because he was going through so much. I think he was just a little, and then you could introduce the PTSD thing and all that, and not that we dove deep into that, but he's missing a leg, so obviously he's probably not thinking the best terms, and it's probably pretty selfless in a way, but in a very negative way. Just wants the best for her. But yeah, that was a good switch up on your end though too. Obviously kind of stole the question there.
No, not at all. I mean, just going back to, I can't remember if I've ever seen a vertical where the guy pretends to cheat. Isn't it like pretty much always the girl. Like I
That's
think,
always the other way around. Yeah.
yeah, like I think of like Breaking the Ice, stuff like that. Like,
Mm.
um, yeah, I just think it was an interesting start where it was again similar, but there were nuances because again they had known each other, they were in a really great relationship, and then there was the time that they weren't together because he was off in the war, and then it doesn't just immediately go straight into she walks in and he's there cheating on her. There was time to breathe, um, which I think is always nice because it makes you start thinking about the characters. Um, but yeah, I mean, kind of what you were saying is not just PTSD, but also like uh so much shame for Ace, which again is
Yeah,
which is like such a better character arc than the typical just, oh, I'm Christian Grey and I'm like really broody and blah blah blah, but this girl changes everything, you know?
yeah. Well, again, I've never had to cheat, but or within the yeah, as a character, and it's like it is rare, but yeah, one thing was I forgot my train of thought.
I have a question. Can I ask my question?
Yeah, yeah, please.
Which is okay. So the other thing, another thing that I thought was very different is I think it's the first verticalized scene where there's a disability that doesn't get magically healed.
Yeah.
So, for instance, the other bodyguard storyline you're in, there's something about, there's quite a few where someone's lost their sight, but it's because of an accident and eventually the sight comes back. And there's been ones with that with hearing, and again, the hearing comes back. And we all know that, you can have very serious illnesses and be healed in probably about 90 seconds on a vertical.
Mhm.
Yeah, definitely. I probably would have not liked if they found a way to I mean, I'm not, I like grounded scripts. If you ask me what I like to do, I do like something real and slice of life even. That it's not always the roles I get. I get, a bodyguard adventure, which I'm not complaining about. But as much as I can ground these things, I do like to do that. And yeah, if they wanted anything other than the fact that it was ending like that, obviously, right? What else would they do? But hearing and sight, I guess you could find a way around where it could be a believable thing. But the best we can do in today's age is prosthetic, and that was a conflict in itself enough. Yeah, I would have been upset if they made it some sort of miracle.
I think it just goes back to saying like similar with the healthcare, it was there, but it wasn't the plot. And um, Ace losing his leg, while it did drive the plot in a way, it the leg itself wasn't the thing that, needed to be fixed. It was Ace's shame for having a prosthetic leg and feeling of unworthiness in his relationship with Elena and unsureness whether she would still view him the same. That was the conflict. So it was a much more emotional issue, and the leg was just, you know, uh, what am I trying to
Could have been a
say?
metaphor of something else. Yeah.
Yeah, it was the leg was just, the stepping grounds in a way for the emotional conflict between the couple.
Which
Just
goes
like,
back to the title too of why the one there is one thing I do love about the title obviously is the fact that they don't mention the not prosthetic or the prosthetic leg. So uh we were talking about that before, but yeah, it was
It's not called My One-Legged Bodyguard.
right.
yeah, so it's supposed to just kind of be I don't know, whatever it's there. It does drive the plot. It's a huge part of the story, obviously, but I
But it's more
honestly
emotional rather than this is, the thing we need to fix. Because I've done a lot of stories like that. I did two verticals with Ethan Kirschbaum that were both wheelchair related. One of them I was in a wheelchair and the other he was in a wheelchair. And not that there weren't parts of those stories that I liked, but it was just that was the plot. I was either trying to heal him or he was trying to heal me. the entire time, and then we fall in love because of the proximity, whereas this was just, it was again something that is maybe not generally widely relatable in terms of a prosthetic leg, but the fact that it's not about the leg makes it a relatable story for a general audience. I'm sure anyone who's had any sort of relationship at some point has felt unworthy of their partner, and that they have failings and that they're not good enough. So I think that's kind of where the heart of the story lies.
It's really interesting because my interpretation of it was a little bit different, and I basically saw it as a cipher for men's mental health.
Oh,
And the fact that basically a lot of men will try and solve stuff themselves and not talk about it.
yeah.
My husband, which I have to prod him because I know, and then eventually he'd talk, and it's like, well, that's why, and then we talk it through. But that's kind of how I saw it, as it was a bit more of a cipher of that, of the fact that actually a lot of it is that rather than talking to Elena about it, it's all very much Ace has done all the journey and all the thinking on his own, not out of disrespect for Elena, but just because he's trying to deal with it all. But then I think that for me is that favourite scene, and I think that's the best I've ever seen you on screen, Kyra, is when you have that moment of like, you think I wouldn't. Yeah, just
Yeah.
that seems amazing.
Thank you. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, now that you mentioned that, definitely a metaphor for men's mental health, because it is about mental health. It's not about Ace's leg. It's about how he feels about it. And, that he doesn't feel good enough. And also a superior of his that's also a man telling him how he should feel about it.
Yeah, he's very quiet about it.
Perpetuating the whole, you shouldn't talk about it. You shouldn't talk about your feelings. You shouldn't say this happened to you.
She's right on the nose though of mental health, and I don't know who our double was for the forgot his name, unfortunately. Who our amputee. We had a real, obviously, guy who came in a couple days who shot all of the close-ups of the amputation. Jude. Yeah, and he's been doing a lot of great work. And well,
he shared a story.
Yeah, and I wish I could have talked to him more honestly about the role. And I did get an opportunity to talk to him for 1 or 2 out of the 3 days that he was there, just about how and it was actually before the scene where she finds out the truth and everything and what he had went through with telling his wife about it. He had actually postponed telling her for at least a couple weeks, and he didn't really know how to handle it. And but he basically just gave me some tips about it, and that kind of drove the rest of the shoot, which at that point I had only 4 more days. But I'm glad that you caught on some of the reluctance of Ace not to tell anybody, despite a lot of his friends telling him to speak up. It's completely parallel to men's health if you look at it that way. Completely, I'm really appreciative of you seeing that and bringing that up. It was, and that's another way that you could view the amputation as I keep saying amputation, by the way, it's not the right terminology, but it's a metaphor really of not being able to speak up on certain things. He could have told her in the beginning. I think it would have been fine. And that's one thing that we had to be careful of in the plot, we had to make it believable of this reluctance. And it came from, she had to kind of give that to me with her performance of, through her vulnerability of everything going on. This was the last thing that she needed to know. At least that was Ace's opinion. But yeah, no, thank you for that. And I think you're absolutely right.
And I wanted to ask a bit about the physicality of the role as well, because I do think there's a few moments where I feel like you're trying to stand and kind of show that one side's not quite as... Is that conscious, or is this just me reading too much into it?
No, I had to ask the director on certain scenes of when I'm walking out of the frame that if I could give a little bit of a limp, something, and maybe I need to go back and see where I did those limps or whatever it was. But I love physical aspects of attaching to something physical just as much as I love putting wardrobe on in the morning. It makes you feel like the character. So any
Wore
kind
the
of
hell out of that earpiece.
yeah, the earpiece was. I mean,
Well, did
God,
that not drive you crazy?
my
did.
Lord,
Really annoying.
Talk of like every second on set.
it was
Mark's always grumbling about his earpiece.
scab in both ears. If you notice, I switch kind of sides sometimes, and God, yeah, that was terrible. But no, it was a great thing to latch onto. I don't know if I was limping at the right times. Maybe I gave it away, but it was usually. I remember in the gym, I was limping a lot after she hit me, and yeah, those were exciting scenes to do because
That's fun.
Because I mean, that was, I mean, obviously, I love everything about that, but that was another sequence that I really liked. We've kind of slightly had a bit of self-defense sort of stuff before in verticals,
Yeah.
but I think that's probably the most extensive one that I've seen. And
Yeah.
obviously, it works with the chemistry of the characters, but also, okay, I'm kind of going there. But I got really cross because there's been a few verticals where it's been talking about choking out during sex, and it's just made me beyond furious. Um, and then the fact that then, I mean, basically, I was, just to explain what this vertical did to me, I was on a week of, I'd watched a load of stuff that had been on, well, not watched, I tried to watch stuff that had been on two of the main vertical channels, and they were all that kind of, that's when I did that hypersexualization post, and I was just like, I can't do this anymore. I can't watch all this stuff. Why am I putting my effort into this? I don't want to be associated with this. So I was on a whole, like, mentally throwing it out the window. Then I watched this, and you basically saved verticals for me and
Aw.
kept me here because I was about to, like, I was in a strop. And that was the thing, that not only was it not that, but it was a male character showing a female, this is how you get out of that situation. And obviously then it does lead to more of the plot. I mean, also clearly, I don't know, I just can't tell you how much that meant. And it just felt like you honestly saved verticals for me with that.
Oh,
So,
thank you. No, I think that was definitely a major green flag in terms of writing, in terms of Ace's character. Um, I think just Ace in general, like, yes, he's a bodyguard. His entire job is to protect Elena, but, you know, he doesn't see her as helpless. And that scene proved that. He's like, look, you know, you should know these little tidbits. I also liked, I don't know if this was a choice you consciously made or if this was something that we were told during the stunt coordination rehearsals. When he does, at one point, Ace is teaching Elena how to like break out of a chokehold. Like she's on the ground but you don't put your hands fully around my throat. You're just demonstrating like, you know, how it could be, but you still make it so that I know that like I'm safe.
yeah, that was with. I remember talking to Adam about that, about just how I could do it because if I had moved a couple more inches up, what difference does it make? So yeah, I didn't. It wasn't like, you know. I remember thinking that I didn't want to. There's no reason to actually put my hands around where it would be a choke, which is right in the middle there. Yeah, I'm glad you noticed that. Yeah, I don't think it was
Yeah.
conscious as it was definitely conscious in a way. Definitely wanted to make that scene very delicate, and there's obviously a lot of intimacy in verticals. Not that that was an intimacy scene, but we certainly could have turned it into more of one. And I didn't want that. I wanted it to be a little different. As much as Ace maybe found that to be a thing that he wanted to do, you know, explain stuff in the gym. He probably loves that kind of stuff. He loves martial arts and stuff. So he was it was more of a sweet thing to do. It was him having fun, trying to bond. That's what I wanted to make it more about. And of course, then you fight everything else with the editing and the way they might make it appear, and they add music. But despite all that, the writing was good enough that I think you saw through whatever was there.
Yeah,
It's good.
I think yeah.
I want to like totally leap now to something totally different, which is Elena as CEO and those boardroom scenes,
Yes.
which are, I was rewatching, it is rich white men of a certain age.
Yep.
I rewatched it and I was like, yeah, they haven't stuck anyone in that room who is not a white man of a certain age.
Mhm.
Then I realized, I don't know if you twigged. There's definitely an actor who looks very like a certain well-known Amazon CEO.
Oh yeah.
I don't know if that was on purpose, but there was definitely a
I don't think
vibe.
it's on purpose, but like, casting did pop off with that. Yeah. Super cool guy.
Yeah.
But yes. It definitely, I mean, even filming it,
Mm.
everyone was super great, but you know, the moment where um Elena's just kind of given her project proposal. She's like, this is how we're going to do things. I'm the CEO. And then when all of the white men in the room stand up and just are like staring at her, it definitely like, uh, it was intimidating. Of course it is. And, um, I think, you know, there are so many scenes in verticals where it's the classic trope of girl is cornered. Um, but instead of it being a sexual thing, it's a power dynamic thing, which I think is not that, you know, sexual assault is like not a thing in real life, not trying to say that in the slightest, but you know, it felt like more of a, at least in the situation Elena was in, it felt like more of a concern that should be raised in a way. And I think that was um better story wise, more challenging as an actor, and it actually did feel threatening because it was more subtle.
But I mean, I've run my own business, and those people are out there, and I've sat in networking meetings and meetings with people like that. So it's
Yeah.
not that far from the truth.
No, not at
So
all.
it was very awesome to see you hold your own. Thank you very much for that. There's also a brilliant scene as well, which made me laugh a lot, which is and actually it's linked to the costumes because you know we had our YouTube Kyra, and obviously you mentioned they always put you in these pastels and that you're not a fan. And I really noticed in this one that you start off with that and then they let you wear some colour.
Yes, I do get to
So
wear
there's
some
a
color.
brilliant scene where you march in the red dress. And
Yeah.
she's on, she's taking over. And then you basically just slam a folder
Yeah.
into Acey's chest. Oh, you make me laugh so much, Mark Vega. Just your eyes. I'm like, what the hell? This folder. It's one of the funniest scenes in the whole thing when I
Very
rewatched it.
expressive eyes. They can tell you
Yeah.
everything in 2 seconds. Yeah.
And I kind of want to know, was that like, did you expect that? Because it felt like you were reacting in the moment of Kyra does sorry, I always get your name wrong. I'm sorry. Can't, no, I
No,
got it
you were
right.
right.
Sure.
You had
I'm terrible with names.
it.
And just the way you slammed it in, I felt like, is that just natural reaction of what are you doing?
It
Just,
could
I
be,
just love that.
honestly. We love to have our little improv moments.
Yeah, I obviously you like to um it's if I can get in the moment of someone doing something different every take of I wanted her to kind of scare me with the desk thing probably most likely kind of direct each other in those kind of scenes to get good little, and that goes to the director too of making sure that there's a shot of me reacting to something as simple as her throwing the folder on, and that goes to the editing, and it goes to show the fact that it's all such a team thing. And I could give that reaction, but maybe there is not a reveal good enough to show it. And but yeah, I'm glad that you caught that. I think those little moments that verticals do make it so much more funny and believable. Those little I don't want to call them inserts, but just I'm imagining that there was a little bit of a reveal or a pan up or a insert of my face reacting to it, but that's good. Yeah, it goes back to props to the director and the cinematographer stuff.
Yeah. I mean, I also like when there's some flexibility, typically within the director's capacity for letting us switch up some lines. And I feel like you do a really good job of taking the dialogue and making it your own in a way that feels incredibly naturalistic, um, and just very believable, like viscerally so.
You can't always do that on these, and that is it is a big battle, and it goes back to the whole, sometimes you lose some of the plot in the translation. Well, you lose a lot of the flow sometimes too, as much as, I mean, there's such talented writers, but it's such an international thing of translating these great original scripts that usually come out of K-dramas or Chinese dramas. There's so many good ones, but if you're doing it in the US, you might want the actor to kind of, at least I would like to put some of my own stuff in it because it does make it easier. It's hard to not be uh, have some sort of the same idiosyncrasies to your personality that you have in real life. You bring that to the stage as much as you don't want to sometimes, and that's why the role you choose can be very interesting because you do have to bring a part of yourself to it. So when they let us make some lines up and add a little bit of our flavor to it and our DNA to it, it adds responsibility because you better know your lines to begin with so that you know where to go off of from so you don't ruin the plot. You have to know kind of something parallel to say. But yeah, I could talk about it all day, but it depends on the production. Sometimes you can't do that, and it does change the outcome to the vertical. Sometimes it's very strict, and not to say that that's not warranted, but obviously I prefer, like many other actors, to have a little bit of freedom with all that. Especially with soaps, because sometimes there are cheesy lines and it's hard to say in a believable way, but you have to really take in the universe. That's why it helps sometimes when you're doing like a werewolf one or something that's not as grounded, that you can kind of go into that universe or something. But this one, I'm glad that we were able to, because it matched the tone of it, which was supposed to be a little grounded.
Yeah.
And the other, there's another scene that, obviously it's not played for humour, but I think just there's some amusingness of when, I think you talk about the lovely Ryan Jacobi,
Ah,
Chad, when he's in charm mode, takes you out to
Jackabucci.
dinner, and the ace just looms. Like, and I'm joining the dinner.
Yeah,
The dinner scene.
It's just the shot. It's just literally, and obviously that it works even more because Mark, you are so tall.
Yeah.
So it's just that makes it work even
Yeah,
more.
the
And then
shot
it's
angle
there,
that
and
was
I felt
wild. You looked like fucking Slenderman. You looked like you were 7
this on
feet
the
tall.
roof?
This was on the roof.
Yeah.
Jen, it was so
I know. I was gonna
freaking
say it
cold
was
that
so
night.
cold.
Oh,
It doesn't
that was
show.
it doesn't show except in our noses a little bit. If you look back, you can see our noses are quite red. It was, yeah, we were fighting for our lives trying to film that scene. But I think our real life annoyance with just the environment was definitely helping us with our performances.
It was the last scene of the day.
Yeah.
And it was very cold.
So cool.
You're on the rooftop. And it was beautiful though. But yeah, shout out to Ryan Jacobucci. He is an amazing actor, and he totally elevated the whole project because he had a tough role.
It's really good to have a strong supporting cast, honestly.
Yeah, it really helps, and because a lot of the times as a lead, you have to you have some boundaries because you have to carry you have to be opposite of the plot sometimes. If the plot is so crazy, you have to be the kind of a rock along with the actress. But Jacobucci he had an opportunity to go big, and he did, and he's very believable as a lead and a what is it called, a villain.
Yeah, he did a really good job with that scene. There were several times where I think I'm probably broke, and I think he might have broke a few
Sure.
takes.
Yeah, no,
Jacobucci's he made us break almost every scene. Like if there was a blooper reel, Ryan Jacobucci would be in all of the clips.
he's a dear friend. He was so nice, and he grew up around New York too. So well,
Really
not too.
really genuine guy.
Yeah.
But I think that's what makes it better because obviously he is so charming.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Have you seen
And then
some of his
also
other
you
stuff?
get that little reveal of the fact that when he's then talking to his father, he gets hit, and you're like, okay,
Yeah.
that kind of makes you understand it more. And it's yeah, I just think it was really interesting. And then it was a very clever the proposal scene.
Uh-huh.
I just thought that was quite clever because it was a way of bringing in that power
Uh-huh.
without actually ever. You see, again, you can show that power play and someone totally taking advantage without having to go to like a basically sexual assault.
Absolutely.
Does that make sense? But that's just as mortifying. And then obviously the whole
Yeah. I
and
mean, again,
yeah,
like it was so much about work for Elena, like the
Mhm.
worst thing that Chad could do would be to put her in a compromising position in, her workplace,
Mm.
but again, it was kind of funny as well. Yeah, absolutely 100% agree. I think the writing, it's just creative in terms of, kind of every facet in a way,
Yeah, that's hard to make believable, and that party was production design did a great job.
yeah.
And by the way, that bar is like 150 years old.
It's a real bar.
Yeah, Lower East Side. It smelled like a some sort of fraternity house or something. Bunch of dried up beer and hardwood floors. It yeah, that was I remember that scene, and I love how they give Ace a lot of longing moments of watching things happen, and he's not exactly able to respond. Of course, he couldn't let her say yes and acted as her bodyguard in that moment to take her out a bit. But yeah, no, I just wanted to point out that that was a real bar. It was a real venue and a real stage, and it just that was a good day. It was a lot of hard scenes there, and yeah, you. I remember that scene clearly. I was hoping that you didn't say yes. Poor Ace. God, because Ryan was smart about that. His character was smart about that. He knows to do it in public because Ace would probably come in there and kill him if there was anything else going on. So it's good.
And I just want to ask both of you, are there any favourite scenes that I've not asked you questions about that you just want to go? I love that scene. That was one of
I
the highlights for me.
really loved, there were two scenes where Elena is kind of comforted by Ace. And I think there's some of the best written uh, dynamics between the main couple in any vertical, at least I've ever done. Because that's usually my main beef with a lot of verticals, or that, the entire story revolves around these two people, and yet somehow their relationship is not very fleshed out, and there's not a lot of actual like deep-ish conversations between the two of them. So oftentimes I'm left at the end like, why did those people even like each other again?
Mm.
But there's this one scene where um Elena is like, I think it was after it she either had a nightmare about when her dad died or it was after his funeral. But she was like, um, do you really, like, she asks Ace, do you really think I have the power to change this industry? And that, I remember filming it. I did not have to pull very deep in terms of emotional uh response there, because it really did just feel like I was talking about, verticals in that moment. I was like, do you really think I have the power to change this industry? Because it is such a prevalent thing in anything that we're really doing. Um, but I really liked that, you know, Elena, while still in a vulnerable place, she was still coming to Ace from a very strong perspective. Like, do you think I'm strong enough to do this? I want to know if I'm strong enough to do this. So I really liked that scene. And then, of course, his response was 10 out of 10. Green flag is, basically like, I don't think there's anything you can't do. Um, and then, and then the other scene where I just feel like Elena really, the entire time, just is really calling Ace out. She's not taking no for an answer because she has this love for him. Um, and I think now I'm talking about the scene after her father's funeral where she's basically like, Ace, what is going on with you? You are very conflicting in terms of how you behave towards me, and she calls that energy out. But then the very, final kind of reveal scene where she sees his leg. He says some not nice things to her because
That's the scene I was gonna choose.
yeah. Do you want to go into it?
I think that was the hardest scene, so I wanted to point that one out because me and Kyra were like in disagreement about it was like tough because we were on the clock and it was such an important scene, but and usually the production will make more time for those scenes and they'll make more time for some of the important scenes that drive the plot, the beginning scenes and the ending and the middle, whatever. But yeah, that was a good one. It was, I know we talked about it a little bit already, but that was a favorite scene of mine just because it challenged me so much. And I knew that there was a good opportunity to kind of show the angst and the reluctance to talk about the mental health of it. I mean, because admitting to the leg was a way towards, a resolution for Ace and perhaps to clear up his mind. It was there the whole time, and that was another thing too. But that scene definitely was a favorite of mine. Kyra did such a good job, and I think because we cared so much about doing it right, and it did come out well. I've only seen this, saw it once, and I saw it because we were doing the interview, and I actually saw it twice because I did see some of it when it came out, and then I learned that we were doing the interview, so I watched it again. But I did happen to see that scene, and luckily they used my first take. They had me do it 2 or 3 times, and I was lucky.
Like 5 takes.
I was okay. No, I didn't.
They gave you a lot.
They gave me a lot compared to Kyra, who only got one.
They like Mark more. They wanted to see more of you. That's why.
She only got 1 take, and she did such a good job. And obviously, you come up for close-ups, and it's a different thing. Usually, especially when she came over and we were consoling each other. But that was definitely a tough one, and that's the one I talked to Jude about before and after, and just kind of telling me some of the things. And that's what, as an actor, all you could ask for is a challenge and an opportunity with the writing, and knowing that it's purely your responsibility to show up that day and do something well, because everyone else already did their job. The writer wrote the good scene. It's there. There's an opportunity to express human interaction and life on screen, and that's all you could ask for. So that was a dream come true for me, literally, like to be able to have that opportunity. And the pressure was on, by the way, and it was more so after, because I did talk to Jude a lot after I did the scene, because he was telling me, because he watched it, heard it, and he was just telling me what he liked and what was. So I was like, oh man, I hope it comes out well, because that was important. And again, it's such a team aspect. You could give a great performance or a bad one. You could either be saved or, in your opinion, tarnished by the way, not tarnished, but the editing is important and what they do with the music. And I think silence goes a long way, which you don't get a lot of in verticals, which can kind of sometimes be, not to go off on a tangent here, but that scene they gave us a lot of good moments. And I know there was music in it, but not as much as they could have put in. I think they let the words kind of speak for themselves. And that's a good compliment for the actors on the day, knowing that, oh, okay, well, maybe you don't need music all the time. You don't need the sound effects and all that. It could just be the facial expression that kind of leads to it. And that goes for lines too. Sometimes you don't need to say the lines. But anyway, yeah, that's my scene.
Fun little anecdote about Jude, our wonderful body double, because Mark doesn't actually have a prosthetic leg. So day 1 of shooting, production asked Mark, they were like, hey, which leg, you can choose which leg do you want to be the one that has the prosthetic, and I think you chose your right leg. And then when they brought Jude in to be the body double,
I chose my left leg.
Oh, sorry, he chose his left leg.
I could hop on one leg.
He could hop on one leg. Then when Jude comes in one of the later days to be our body double, it was in his leg was his right leg that he had the prosthetic on.
We had 2 body doubles, and it was both their right leg.
Yeah, both was the exact opposite leg of the one that Mark chose. So they had to just shoot it and then invert the footage, which was funny. But last thing I was going to say about that scene is just from like character perspectives, when Ace gets essentially caught, as Elena walks in and sees the leg, and he says some not nice things because he feels cornered and ambushed. And I think a lot of people might have either been scared or angry that, he you were basically like, get the fuck out, like very scary tone. But Elena wouldn't back down, which I really, really loved about her. And she was there, and she said all the right things, that she was like, I'm always going to be here. You can't keep pushing me away. So I think that was also just a scene that I hadn't really gotten to do in a vertical. And again, what I think is so special about this one is that it's a very well written dynamic between the two leads, and it makes you actually really care about the relationship.
So good. I'm going to wrap this up soon because I'm conscious of taking your time. I just wanted to ask, because obviously both of you, you're the leads in that, and there's a lot of dialogue. Just, I haven't asked this enough. How do you learn? How do you learn the dialogue? What's the
Ah,
tip?
gosh, I wish that we could sound all like professional and say like we study our lines so hard, but you know, typically for verticals you get about 100 pages and you're shooting it in 9 to 10 days. So that's all in all about 10 pages per day, give or take, sometimes more. Um, Vertical actors have, I think, created this own special ability for themselves where they can all learn lines like that. And I think it's similar to like actors in sitcoms where they just are able to learn lines on the fly. So oftentimes I will say, at least for me, the way we shoot a scene is typically all the actors come in the room. The director takes us through what we call blocking, which is we basically figure out where we're going to stand, if our characters are moving around in the scene, what those beats will be. And then we do like 1 to 2 rehearsals where we're all saying our lines. That is when I'm learning. That is when most of the actors, at least ones that I've worked with, are learning. So we all have like our scripts in hand and we kind of go through it and we're learning and we're kind of playing, hey, can I change this line here because it doesn't really make sense, or I think this would sound better. So that is kind of my
You're better.
process.
She's better at, I mean, it depends on the day and how much you have, but I think what she's saying is true to some extent, and I'm definitely, I do that, a lot of the time. But here's the thing is that, uh, and you don't get a lot of time before shooting these things. You get a week, maybe 2 weeks, maybe 2 days. Um, but you better read the scripts. I like to read the scripts 2 or 3 times before I start, and then while I'm shooting, and again, 2 or 3 times is not a lot. I read it and again, when I read it, I'll read a page over again 10 times just because I didn't understand it, or maybe there's an opportunity to, but and then you go in with that knowledge of a structure, and this is how my mind works. You know the structure of the plot, and when you read the scenes that you have that day, that morning in the makeup chair, or when you wake up, or whenever they come back to you, and you say, "Oh, this is that puzzle piece," and then you can kind of remember them uh, uh, last minute because you know how they affect the whole plot. It's not like, if you didn't read the script, I'll tell you that, then it's really hard to know the lines the morning of because you don't even know how they connect. So you have to obviously know you do your homework before the production even begins, and then you can kind of because it helps, you don't want to get locked into a way, but I like to rehearse as much as possible. You just don't have time.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. I mean,
You don't have time.
we shoot 12-hour days. So at the end of the day, the last thing I want to do is go home and look at the, 10 to 12 pages that I have for the next day. I want to go home, I want to eat my dinner, go to sleep, and then be refreshed for the next day.
Yeah. You know the plot. You wake
Yeah.
up and you know what scenes are coming that day, and you take a look maybe the night before, and you know what scenes are coming that day. And of course, if you have a big monologue, you might need to go through it the night before, but maybe not. If you know the plot well enough, and but it's definitely a muscle too, memorizing for that. But if you know your character well enough, I know I hate when actors say, "Oh, you know your character, you can't do any wrong," but you definitely need to prepare. But
Yeah.
these things do work like a soap series or a sitcom where it is fast, and any preparation you do before it really helps because sometimes you are learning it before the scene starts.
I did have one special circumstance on the last shoot I was on. I had to say an entire like paragraph of dialogue in French. Um,
Oh,
yeah, and I don't know a word of French. So that I had to definitely prep for, and I was, like on Google Translate and figuring all that out. But for the most part, pretty straightforward because also we are at this point in where verticals are at, um, often playing the same characters over and over again.
Yeah.
so
Well,
thank you so much for this. Just yeah, are there any upcoming projects you want to talk about? And do you think you can be reunited and work together again on the screen?
Oh, I'd love to. Are you
yeah,
kidding me?
absolutely. I'd love to work with Kyra
I'd
again.
love to work with Mark again. I
Mm.
want, I feel like we'd really kick ass in a rom-com.
Yeah, obviously,
Mm.
venturing more into
Yeah.
comedy. I'd love to do a comedy.
Yeah, I feel like in some ways, I mean, you're such a talent. I feel like a rom-com would be a little wasted on your talent, but in other ways, no, because I think if it was a really well-written rom-com, um,
Yeah.
there could be some really fun, good moments. I know that Kirby was in a really good rom-com recently, so
Yeah, I as far as projects go that come out, I have a show. I have one called Mr. Governor that'll be out.
okay.
Shot that in Vancouver with Kirby.
Mr.
She brought
Governor.
up Kirby. That's a good one. I actually have about 4 or 5 new verticals coming out.
Do you wear like a
That's
monocle at all? Because you're a governor?
no.
Oh, miss
Uh,
opportunity.
Shot in the beautiful Vancouver, Mr. Governor, and then there's about 4 other ones. I have a football one coming out too, where I'm playing a quarterback. That would be fun, so keep a lookout for that. But as far as working with Kyra again, I'm sure we will, whether it's
You're on my
vertical or
list.
not. Obviously, we got to travel last time.
Yeah, we had so much fun in New York.
That's always an ambitious luxury, but it's it'd be fun to do it in LA too. I know Kyra likes to.
Let's try.
You don't want. Oh, Kyra actually likes to get out of
I
LA.
love to get out of LA. I mean, I had so much fun in New York
I
with
get lazy.
with Mark. Oh my gosh. At every night after we wrapped, like, because New York is a city that never sleeps. So it was fantastic. Even if we wrapped at, 11 p.m., we would, let's go to this weird restaurant. We would,
Yeah, we
we
wouldn't
were,
get dinner. I mean, we'd get dinner on set sometimes, but if not, obviously you got to get. And that's the other thing about learning the lines. Is sometimes you're getting off set. You wake up at 9 a.m. because you got to hit a shuttle, and sometimes you're
yeah,
not even filming in New York. You're filming in Jersey. So you add the 12-hour day, you add the driving to the location. It could take an hour, 2 hours sometimes to get there. So you got to wake up, and it could turn into a 15-hour day. You
but
got to.
we had a lot of fun. We got a lot of pizza. At one point, it started pouring rain on us, and we were like running through the streets of New York with our pizza in hand.
Yeah, no, it was.
We
It
had an
was,
adventure for
it
sure.
was definitely fun.
Kira and Mark's fabulous adventure.
Of course, I remember having auditions every day after set. So
We go and film them.
I'd have no time. I'd have to either FaceTime my friend Jared. Shout out Jared Staub for helping me that week on my auditions in my hotel room. And Kira amazingly also helped me. Um, but um, but yeah, no, it was fun. New York was fun. Shout out short New York.
So I think we've just worked out clearly what we need is when we reunite both of you,
Yeah.
it's for a rom-com set in London.
Ooh, let's go to London, Mark.
I would love to go to London, and I know that there's verticals being shot in London, not very commonly. I don't know how are they shooting a
No,
lot?
it's exploded this year. So
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, find a production
They're
and
still
tell us.
figuring out like bringing actors over, I think.
I
They're,
got an offer for
mm,
one, but I didn't work out. But I'd like
yeah,
to go over
same.
there.
Yeah,
but yeah, so I think we've
definitely
just
down. I want to go. If I go, I'll
I
try to
can't
bring you with me.
Great.
I can't thank you enough both for your time and also for this vertical because I said it's slightly rescued verticals for me because I was disillusioned for a week and you saved me. So thank you so much both of you for this project and just everything you both do and all the amazing performances you both put in.
Jen, you make it so worthwhile to do what we do. You've done so much for us. So thank you, and thank you for getting up early to do this. You're such a saint.
Yeah.
You know, we all love you, the whole community. We really support what you do, and we can't thank you enough. You don't ever have to thank us.
Yeah.
You make the job a lot better.
Really. And just thank you so much for being such a shining beacon and highlighting verticals such as this one that, are pushing the envelope. Um, I I loved this script, but I figured it wouldn't have a ton of commercial success. And while it's had some, I definitely just really appreciate you highlighting it within the space because I've had, producers and casting directors reach out to me saying that they saw the response to this show and that they liked my performance, and I really attribute that to the wonderful review that you wrote because a lot of people are, looking to you and to, wonderful other people in the space that are highlighting,
Yeah,
good writing.
Jen, it's like it means so much what you do and shining some light on some of the projects that we do. We work hard on these and we want them to be enjoyed by you, by an audience, and that's always an extra thing that when you're performing these things, you don't even think about the fact that people will be watching it. It comes into your mind, and I like to push it away, but because you try to be truthful and all that jazz, but it's such a luxury for you to be able to highlight these things and give them reviews, and the response has been so encouraging. It could be as powerful as helping us get out of bed in the morning to go to work at 5 a.m., whatever it is, and knowing that you guys enjoy them. It really means a lot. It
Yeah.
really does.